What if the history of our world was digitally deleted and physically scrubbed less than 150 years ago? Take a look at the Urbano Monte map from the late 16th century. You won't see a frozen wasteland or a collection of warring tribes. Instead, you find a massive unified empire called Tartaria, spanning the entire northern hemisphere, complete with hundreds of walled cities and complex infrastructure. Is it just a cartographic error, or is it the smoking gun of a lost global superpower? In 1957, a classified internal CIA memo, document RDP 78-02771R, admitted that the history of this region was being falsified to hide a high level of cultural development. We are told these were nomadic people, yet their star forts exist on 5 different continents, identical in every mathematical detail. Had the archives tell a story someone went to great lengths to seal forever? Imagine a library so vast it contained the blueprints for the entire modern world. Not just books, but the technical manuals for a lost age of wireless energy and global unity. Researchers call this the last archive, the final repository of Great Tartaria. According to the theory, this wasn't just a regional kingdom, it was a sophisticated global federation. But between 1850 and 1920, a shadow fell over this knowledge. While we were told the world was entering a new era of enlightenment, the true records were being fed to the flames. Suspicious city fires, violent revolutions, and the sudden demolition of old world architecture systematically erased the physical proof of this civilization's existence. If the Tartarian Empire was real, then our current understanding of evolution, technology, and even our own ancestry is a carefully constructed fabrication. Every power grid we pay for today and every history book in our schools would be part of a grand deception designed to hide a world that was once free and technologically superior. To understand how a superpower could vanish from the face of the earth in just a few generations, we first have to look at the official story. And more importantly, we have to look at why that story is finally starting to crumble. If you open a modern textbook, you'll find a very convenient explanation for the vast territory of Northern Asia. They call it a vacuum, a wild, uncivilized frontier inhabited by scattered nomads until the Russian Empire and the Qing dynasty civilized it. This narrative didn't happen by accident, and it was meticulously crafted in the late 18th century by a group of German and Russian historians like Gerhard Friedrich Müller and August Ludwig von Schlözer. They are the ones who reclassified Tartary as a vague geographic term. They told us that the maps were simply wrong, that the cartographers of the past were just guessing. But does that make sense? In the 1771 edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica, Tartary isn't described as a wasteland. It is listed as the largest country in the entire world, occupying a space larger than most continents combined. By the 1850s, that entry had vanished. In less than 80 years, a world empire was downgraded to a collection of primitive tribes. It's one of the fastest disappearances of a political entity in recorded human history. And the red flags aren't just in the books, they are etched into the ground. Look at the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway in the 19th century. The official records claim it was built by peasants using primitive hand tools and wooden carts. Yet, as you look at the vintage photographs, you see massive stone viaducts and sophisticated bridges that mirror Roman engineering. How did a pre-industrial workforce lacking heavy machinery move millions of tons of precision-cut stone across a frozen wilderness? Why does the old-world infrastructure of the Russian frontier look identical to the architecture of Washington, D.C. or London? The official story tells us these were separate developments that just happened to look the same. But the math doesn't add up. If these people were nomads living in tents, and who built the walled cities that populate the maps of the 16th and 17th centuries? Where did the stone go? Where did the people go? History suggests a linear path of progress, from the horse and buggy to the steam engine. But when you look at the sheer scale of the ruins left behind, it feels like we didn't invent the modern world. It feels like we inherited it. Consider the suspicious timeline of the mid-19th century. Between 1840 and 1890, almost every major city in the world experienced a Great Fire or a massive reconstruction. From Chicago to Moscow, the old archives were destroyed, and new standardized history textbooks were issued. It was a global reset of the collective memory. They tell us it was progress, but the evidence suggests it was a cleanup operation. That the answer to what really happened lies in the documents they forgot to burn, and the technology that was too big to hide. The most chilling piece of evidence isn't found in a dusty attic, but in the declassified archives of the United States government. Take a look at CIA document RDP 78-02771R, an internal memo from 1957 titled National Cultural Development. It contains a startling admission. The document describes how the Communist Party ordered Soviet historians to falsify the history of the Tartars. Their goal was to hide the fact that these people were a distinct, highly developed civilization. Why would a modern superpower be so afraid of an ancient group of nomads? Because if the public knew that a unified, advanced society once occupied that land, the entire Soviet and Western claim to authority would lose its legitimacy. This wasn't just about politics. It was about the suppression of a specific kind of power. To see this in action, we have to look at the great expositions of the late 19th century, specifically the 1900 Paris Exposition. Look at the high-resolution photographs preserved in the French National Archives. You'll see the Street of the Future. It featured a massive three-tiered moving sidewalk that transported thousands of people simultaneously across the city. Remember, this was at a time when most people were still supposedly using horse-drawn carriages. The official story says these were temporary displays built for the fair, but these structures were made of stone, steel, and intricate electrical components. The even more suspicious is the Palace of Electricity. It wasn't just a building. It was a demonstration of a world illuminated by thousands of glowing bulbs at a time when light bulbs were a brand new luxury. Some researchers believe these expositions weren't fairs at all. They were the final public displays of Tartarian technology before the reset crews came in to dismantle them and sell the public a more expensive, metered version of reality. And then there is the question of where this energy came from. If you look at the architecture of the Old World, from the great cathedrals to the Capitol buildings, you see a consistent pattern: massive domes, metallic spires, and intricate copper finials at the very top. We are told these are religious ornaments. But when you apply the laws of physics, a different picture emerges. In electrical engineering, there is a fundamental formula for resonant frequency. Frequency equals 1 over 2 pi times the square root of LC. In this equation, L represents inductance and C represents capacitance. If you look at the structure of an old world cathedral, it functions exactly like a giant resonator. The iron or copper spires act as antennas, capturing atmospheric electricity from the ionosphere. The massive stone body of the building, often sitting on an aquifer, acts as a ground and a capacitor. This is the exact principle Nikola Tesla used for his Wardenclyffe Tower. He wasn't inventing something new. Many believe he was trying to reactivate the wireless power grid of the Tartarian era. If this is true, then the Dark Ages weren't a time of ignorance, but a time of blackout. And the Enlightenment was simply the period when the new elites figured out how to put a meter on the energy that used to be free for everyone. But how could they prove these people were more than just a legend? They checked the lineage. In 1730, a book was published titled A Genealogical History of the Tartars. It contains a detailed record of the sovereigns of Tartary. These weren't tribal leaders or warlords. They were a recognized, legitimate bloodline of emperors whose authority was documented by European royalty. The maps of the time, like those of Abraham Ortelius, and the massive planisphere of Urbano Monte, show a world brimming with life in regions we are now told were empty. They show hundreds of cities with names, borders, and complex canal systems in the heart of Siberia and the Gobi Desert. If this technology and this population were global, then the cities we live in today, the ones with the grand columns and the soaring arches, weren't built by our great-grandfathers with hammers and nails. They were inherited. We are living in the ruins of a much higher civilization, using their old world shells as our modern offices. The question remains, what happened to the people who built them? And why is the evidence of their downfall buried under 10 feet of dirt? If the Tartarian Empire was as vast and advanced as the evidence suggests, how do you make it disappear? You don't just burn the books. You have to bury the evidence, literally. This brings us to one of the most controversial and visual pillars of the Tartaria theory, the mud flood, and walk through the downtown district of almost any major Old World city, be it New York, Moscow, London, or even small-town America. Look closely at the buildings constructed before 1900. You will notice a bizarre architectural choice. High arched windows and decorative doors are frequently half buried beneath the current street level. The official explanation from architects is that these are light wells, or raised basements, built for aesthetics or drainage. But why would a builder in the 1800s, a time of manual labor and expensive stone, go through the immense effort of carving ornate, decorative facades only to bury them 10 feet underground? It makes no sense. Unless, of course, the street level wasn't always there. Evidence suggests that sometime in the mid-19th century, a global cataclysm occurred, a massive displacement of earth and sediment that reset the geography of the planet. Researchers point to the year 1816, known as the Year Without a Summer, as a possible flashpoint. Records describe a global cooling, failed harvests, and strange dust in the atmosphere. Was this a natural disaster, or the result of a high-tech war that we've been told was just the Napoleonic Wars or the American Civil War? Imagine a world where a global conflict ended with the use of weapons we are told didn't exist yet. The result was a great reset. The survivors didn't build the cities we see in late 19th century photographs. They dug them out. Look at photo 2 in our collection, the ruins of San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake. In the background of the rubble, you see massive stone blocks and foundations that appear to go down dozens of feet into the earth. These aren't the foundations of a city built in the mid-1800s. They look like the ancient megalithic remains of a much older civilization that was simply reskinned by the new settlers. This explains the suspicious timeline. Between 1850 and 1920, the world witnessed an unprecedented wave of destruction. We are told that great fires destroyed the hearts of Chicago, Boston, Baltimore, San Francisco, and Toronto. We are told these were accidents involving lanterns or wood stoves. But what if these fires were intentional? What if they were the controlled demolitions of the final Tartarian archives and technologies. While the buildings burned, the history was rewritten. Well, this is where the concept of the world's fairs takes a dark turn. Between 1893 and 1915, massive temporary cities were built across America. The 1893 Chicago World's Fair, known as the White City, featured colossal neoclassical palaces, advanced electrical grids, and massive water features. The official story says these were built in just 2 years, using plaster and lath, and were designed to be torn down immediately after the fair. Think about that. In an era of horses and handsaws, they allegedly built a city more beautiful and complex than anything we can build today, only to dynamite it 6 months later. It's an absurd waste of resources, unless they weren't building them. What if the world's fairs were actually the rediscovery of existing Tartarian cities? The new owners of the world fenced them off. They called them expositions, showed off the tech to the public one last time to introduce it as their own invention, and then destroyed the evidence to prevent anyone from questioning where it really came from. This erasure extended to the maps. If you compare the Urbano Monte map of 1587 to a map from 1890, the change is staggering. In 1587, the region of Tartaria is lush, green, and teeming with hundreds of named cities. By 1890, that same area is labeled Siberia and is depicted as a frozen, empty void. Where did the cities go? Some believe they are still there, buried under the mud or hidden in restricted zones of the Russian wilderness. And then there are the star forts. There are over 1,000 of these complex geometric fortifications spread across the globe. You can find them in the Netherlands, in Russia, in Japan, and even in the middle of the United States, like Fort Jefferson in the Florida Keys. They are built with a mathematical precision that relates to the resonant frequency we discussed earlier. Their star shapes aren't for defense against cannonballs. That's a weak official explanation. If you look at them from above, they look like circuit boards. Many researchers believe they were part of a global wireless energy grid that functioned in harmony with the atmosphere. When the Great Reset happened, the new elites realized they couldn't allow the public to have free energy. It would make them impossible to control. So they decommissioned the Star Fort, turned the cathedrals into churches, and burned the libraries that contained the manuals for how it all worked. The last archive wasn't just a collection of books, but it was the user manual for a free planet. The victors of the 1850 reset needed us to believe we were the pinnacle of human achievement. They needed us to believe that life was nasty, brutish, and short before the Industrial Revolution. Because if you don't know you were once a king, you won't complain about being a servant. But why go to all this trouble? Who actually benefits from a world that has forgotten its own peak? The answer lies in the very wires that crisscross our streets today, the wires that didn't exist in the Tartarian world. The erasure of Tartaria wasn't just a 19th century project, it is an ongoing effort that continues into the digital age. But as our technology advances, the gatekeepers are finding it harder to hide the physical scars of the past. In recent years, an independent researchers using LiDAR, a remote sensing method that uses light in the form of a pulsed laser to measure ranges to the Earth, have made some startling discoveries. Deep within the Siberian wilderness and beneath the shifting sands of the Gobi Desert, LiDAR has revealed the geometric foundations of massive ghost cities. These aren't the ruins of primitive camps. They are complex, grid-based urban centers with irrigation systems and foundations that perfectly match the locations of cities found on those impossible 17th century maps. Why aren't these discoveries on the front page of every newspaper? Because they fall into the black hole of modern archaeology. In the academic world, and there is a process some call labeling and shelving. When an artifact is found that is too advanced or doesn't fit the nomadic timeline, it is simply relabeled. An intricate gold crown or a precision-engineered gear found in a Tartarian mound is labeled Scythian or Hunnish and moved to a museum basement. By calling it Scythian, they relegate it to a time period and a culture that is safely primitive and extinct. This is the ultimate form of academic suppression. It ensures that the public never connects the dots between a Scythian ornament and the Tartarian global power grid. The evidence is even more visible in our own backyards. Consider the Star Fort network once again. There are more than 1,000 of these structures identified globally. In the United States, we are told that Fort McHenry or Fort Monroe were built by early American engineers to defend against the British. But look at the plans for Fort Bourtange in the Netherlands and compare them to Fort Independence in Boston. They are identical down to the degree of their angles. Are we to believe that 18th century soldiers were sharing high-level geometric blueprints across the Atlantic in the middle of a war? Or is it more likely they were all built by the same global civilization using a standardized architectural language? This language was based on the energy equation. The star shapes, the water motes, and the stone composition suggest these were not military installations, but massive nodes in a power system. The official story tells us that the moats were for defense, but water is an excellent conductor. When paired with the crystalline structures of the stones used in these forts, you have the components of a massive terrestrial battery. The modern suppression continues because acknowledging this would mean admitting that the old world was far more unified and peaceful than our current world of borders and conflict. Today, if a researcher tries to present a paper on the unified architecture of star forts or the mud flood layers found in modern excavations, they are dismissed as a conspiracy theorist. Museums and universities act as the new sealed archives. They hold the artifacts, but they control the context. They give us the what, but they lie about the when and the who. But the ground is literally shifting. As permafrost melts and urban construction uncovers deeper old world layers, even the physical evidence of Tartaria is becoming impossible to ignore. The question is no longer, did they exist? The question is, why was it so important to make us forget? Why does any of this matter today? Why should we care about a lost empire or a handful of half-buried windows in an old building? The answer is simple: control. The suppression of Tartaria isn't just a historical curiosity. It is the foundation of the modern world's economic system. If you can convince a population that they were once primitive and saved by industrialization, you can sell them anything. If the last archive truly contained the secrets to atmospheric energy, the same free energy Nikola Tesla was trying to harness, then our entire global economy is built on a manufactured lie. Think about the trillions of dollars generated every year by the oil, or coal, and nuclear industries. Think about the power the energy cartels hold over every aspect of your life. From the cost of your groceries to the taxes you pay, everything is tied to the price of fuel. But if the Tartarian technology was real, that entire system of debt and scarcity would vanish overnight. We wouldn't need power lines. We wouldn't need meters on our houses. We wouldn't need to fight wars over oil-rich territory. By erasing Tartaria, the victors of the 19th century reset created a world of dependence. They replaced a global wireless grid with a fractured, wired monopoly. They replaced a unified, peaceful culture with a world divided by artificial borders and conflicting histories. This is what researchers call the psychological reset. A people who don't know where they came from are far easier to manipulate, while when we look at the ruins of the old world, the majestic domes and the star-shaped foundations, we aren't just looking at pretty buildings. We are looking at a reminder of what humanity is actually capable of. We are looking at a blueprint for a society that didn't rely on the exploitation of the earth or each other. The suppression continues today because the people at the top of the pyramid benefit from the official story. They benefit from the idea that we are the smartest humans to ever live. But as the last archive begins to leak through the cracks of the internet and independent research, the spell is breaking. We are starting to realize that we aren't moving toward a high-tech future. We are actually just trying to crawl back to a high-tech past that was stolen from us. History is not a straight line of progress, that it is a cycle of rises, falls, and, as the evidence suggests, calculated resets. We have seen the declassified CIA memos admitting to the falsification of history. We have seen the maps that show a world teeming with cities where we are told there was only empty wilderness. We have looked at the mud flood windows and the star-fought resonators that point to a global technology we are only just beginning to rediscover. The last archive of Tartaria may be sealed in the basements of museums and the vaults of the elite, but the evidence is written in the stone of our own cities. The past is never truly gone. It is hidden in plain sight, waiting for a generation with the courage to look past the official narrative and ask the difficult questions. Now, I want to hear from you. Take a walk through your own city. Do you see the half-buried windows? Does your local history start suddenly in the late 1800s with a great fire? Comment below with what you find. If you want to help us unseal more of these hidden archives, make sure to like this video and subscribe. The truth is out there, buried beneath the mud. It's time we start digging.